I'm Carly.
And I'm Laurel.
I live with cerebral palsy.
And I live with a visual impairment.
I can't really walk.
And I can't really see.
So together, we're disabled as folk.
Alright everybody, welcome to episode 3. Hello, Miss Carly.
Hello, Laurel. How's your day?
It was a wild day. It was a Monday that we're recording this, so busy work day for me, but how about you?
Yeah, it definitely was a Monday, but I'm excited to be here and to get the conversation started.
Yes, and today we have a good one. It is a interesting topic for sure. It is a potentially heavier topic, maybe. But today we are talking about ableism, the A word.
Our guest today is an absolute gem of Edmonton theatre. On top of performing on stages across the city and the country, she's also the co-artistic director of The Maggie Tree, a collective dedicated to providing opportunities for female-identifying artists. Her autobiographical one-woman show, Woody, explores living in many different disabled bodies and what it means to consciously celebrate the body that you are in. Please welcome the incredible Christy Hansen.
Hi, Christy.
Hello, Christy.
Hello. So nice to see you folks here today. I am also a disabled human, and I use identity first language. And that's just what feels right for me. And it's been a real journey for me, like celebrating this as being a disabled human as part of my identity, and something that I wouldn't, trade for the world, and has taught me so much and continues to teach me. So I'm really also excited to talk about ableism today, and also how that can manifest internally within us as disabled humans. And yeah, it's a big topic.
Definitely. Well, we're happy to have you. We're excited to have you here. And in regards to just your disability, if you don't mind sharing, like, what does that involve for you?
Yeah, so for me, I was born missing my fibula, which is a bone in my right leg, and missing fibula, and I have a very short tibia, and my knee is also quite valgus. So ultimately, I was born with significant limb difference, and that resulted in a lot of surgeries growing up, which ultimately led to the amputation of my right foot, and I use a prosthetic leg to get around when I can, when my body allows me to. So that is, for me, how I experience disability in the world.
Okay, so should we maybe jump right into our big question to start, get things rolling?
Sure.
So the first question we have, that I think maybe we can each go around and potentially talk about our own experiences with this, but in regards to yourself, maybe Christy, if you're okay, we can start with you. How would you define ableism in your lived experience with a disability? I know it's a big overarching question, so if it's just one thing for now that we can chat about, feel free. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I guess probably the discrimination of disabled folks, or in favor of able bodies in the world. And for me, I think, I guess it's the belief that a disabled body is less than, a disabled body or mind are less than, and not welcome. Certainly, and we see that manifest in accessibility for spaces, both physical and community spaces. And you really notice a difference when, and so often, like with disability and ableism, it's just something people don't even think about, but they uphold ableist values, whether they're aware of it or not.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think some people think that the help that they're providing is just that, it's help, but it also can borderline on some ableist behavior. So I definitely think that's something that we should touch on later on, to maybe talk to our listeners that maybe are able-bodied, to say, hey, this help that you're doing, most of the time is well-intentioned. However, this could be how it can be misconstrued to a disabled person. So I'd love to talk about that more with you. Carly, do you have one that you want to share from your experience?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. The two big words that kind of stick out in my definition is the devaluing of human access, whether it be physically or mentally or developmentally, and then just discrimination. So that can be things like, not allowing people into the space, but it can also be deeper and wider than that. And I think Kristi hit it on the head when she said that not necessarily everyone, realizes that they're doing ableist things, but it is a deep conversation. We might even have to come back for a part 2 on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really interesting to hear both of you talk about that. For me, my ableist journey has been slightly different because my disability isn't as outward. So for me, I don't necessarily, when you look at me, you don't necessarily know what my ailments are, which is a catch-22 in a lot of ways because it means that I have to be vocal and speak up for myself and advocate for myself. But it also means that people aren't really able to be as ableist to me, and unfortunately, fortunately, however you want to look at that, because they don't really know what my disability is. So I think for me, I actually had to think about this topic when we were going to talk about it. And I do have some stories that I kind of, to be honest, pushed aside because I didn't at the time think they were ableist. And now I kind of had to rethink them. So, backstory for you, Christy, is I was born with a visual impairment. And pretty much up until high school, I wore very thick glasses that made it quite evident that I was definitely visually impaired. And then once I got to high school, I started wearing contacts and I didn't present as outwardly as disabled at that point. So I started thinking about things that had happened to me when I was still wearing my glasses. For example, like assumptions, especially in school, where, and we can get into this topic later on, but for me, it was a lot of here's this really massive textbook with this really big font that you might not need. Or, here is a teacher writing the letter A as if it's the size of our entire body, even though I can see a regular sized A if I'm close enough to the board. So I haven't had necessarily discrimination in that way, but I'm interested to see in your experiences growing up with a disability, how that kind of worked in your life up until now. Because for me, a lot of it was when I was in school, and now as a more an adult woman, I don't have as many struggles with that now. So mine is kind of fluctuated. I do get a lot though, which I hope we can touch on, and I do believe we will, is the inspiration porn of disability. Because I get a lot of folks when I tell them that I am visually impaired, it becomes this, oh my gosh, really? And you have a job and you have a partner and you have a home and a life and friends. And it's like, that is incredible. And it is I think meant to be complimentary, but definitely can also kind of have a backhanded connotation to it. So I would love for us to chat over that further. But that's kind of the experiences that I have had over my journey living with disability. So
Thank you for sharing that with me. Yeah, it is interesting because I'm also, if I'm wearing pants or I can quote unquote pass as able-bodied too. So it is very interesting. Yeah, what that brings out in me. Like if
right, yeah,
do I like it when I'm passing as able-bodied, or wearing shorts, there's also a comfort in being like, okay, they can just see it. I don't have to explain it. They can see I'm a disabled human rather than having to,
right.
yeah, always be coming out, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful point that you touched on. And Carly, I think you might have a good different experience from what we maybe have is for me at least, I kind of am able to hide it. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because I think that's a debate that I at least have with myself internally is I shouldn't be ashamed to hide this. But to be honest, it is easier. It is easier not to have to wear thick glasses and explain what's wrong, not having kids point at you. Like when I was growing up, a lot of kids would point and be like, what's wrong with her, mom? Or like, why does she look like that? And we learn how to educate and talk to people. But I've been intrigued from your perspective, Carly, because your chair is so prominent and is a part of who you are, which is an awesome part. Thriving, living your best life, love. But how do you navigate that when you unfortunately are in a more direct contact with ableist folks because it's what they see?
See, I think it has been more interesting for me getting older versus you folks, that perhaps it's become slightly easier. For me, I've just been more aware of ableism and how the simplest tasks or the simplest problems are truly ableist, because my parents, my groups of friends never used that word. So like I only started to discover it when I started coming into my own as a disabled human. And boy, let me tell you, it's really obvious now that I know what it is. But I think like part of my journey has just been owning the whole thing. Yes, I have a chair. Yes, I'm spastic, like literally spastic. Yes, I have a really cool service dog. But also, yes, I have a day job and an artistic career and, live alone and do all those things. So, like, I sometimes, for example, in job interviews, literally have to be like, some of my accomplishments are living alone. Because clearly that's not an accomplishment to the typical able that I often interview for or audition for, right? So sometimes, my view of things are obviously going to be different than the able bodied human next door, but also like I've had to work really hard to celebrate those differences and be okay with those differences.
Yep. And I mean, the more I learn about like, the social model of disability versus the medical ideal too, I'm like, oh yeah, like absolutely. Like the world is set up for able-bodied folks. Like, if we all need stairs to get to the second floor. So, all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, but not everyone can use the stairs. So things have just been set up for able-bodied folk, and if we just considered other folks' access needs, it's just a different part of being human. So yeah, that's always been like a really like aha thing for me as I do more disability studies and get more invested in that social model idea that we're a community and we have different access points. So come on, let us in, like think about what we need to be able to participate in quote unquote society.
Yeah.
And the thing is that access needs aren't scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Access needs are literal things we need to survive.
Well, and this is my question for you, is why is it so challenging to understand some of these basic needs? Like, I'm genuinely curious because I understand like maybe in like an older building or something like that, but even then there are ways now to make things accessible, put in a ramp or install an elevator. So I'm intrigued. I'm wondering why, and I'm not on everyone in society by any means, because I know that a lot of people are trying and a lot of people are putting forth effort, but I'm curious to see, maybe from both of your views, why do you think there's such a hesitation for accessibility? I think ramps are great. Like, I don't really use ramps unless I need to, but if I'm with Carly, I love a little incline moment where I can just, not have to take the stairs or like use an elevator. But I don't, as an able-bodied person, don't use elevators or things like that unless I'm with somebody who needs to actually use them, because I feel like they're not really there for me. They're there for people that need to use them. So I'm intrigued, like, to understand why there's some hesitancy there to make things accessible.
Yeah, again, like the default to the able body, and if you look at like queer theory mixed with crip theory, which is also something to like, if the default is the heteronormative, then also like the default is the able bodied, and so people just are like not even thinking about it, or like, oh, it'll cost too much money, or, oh, that's not how I imagined it, like I've even had like sometimes like I need to go like, oh, okay, Carly, where can we meet? Because sometimes I'm not even clocking what place has a step up into the place. So it's just a matter of like opening up our eyes to that.
But yet you're an awesome human who sends me diagrams of the bathroom to make sure it's accessible. Like, not everyone will do that.
Well, but then, and also being like, yeah, like I can, I have a basic understanding, but again, like, as if that's not my access need, if it's not like prevalent in my mind, like we have to just get our defaults maybe to just be more inclusive, right? Or in all aspects of life. So like I'm always interested in like the intersections of other folks facing barriers like LGBTQ2S plus folks and racialized folks. Like there's so much to be learned like in all of those intersections of how we get away from like what is the default setting, which is white, which is able-bodied, which is straight, so and the world has always never been that. So somehow society has somehow made that the default, and that is such a a way in how ableism really is upheld.
And I think too, for me, one of the biggest barriers, or the most obvious one, perhaps, is money.
Oh yeah.
That everyone is always freaking out that it'll cost, you know, $50,000 or whatever to put in an elevator. But really, I mean, when you put in an elevator, you help everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like with my condo building, we had to put in automatic doors. Like that was one thing for us to close on the space. And I still get people 4 years later that are like, oh my gosh, I can carry my groceries in without having to, push a really heavy door. Or, oh my gosh, I had to transfer to a walker because I'm getting older and now everything is easier. So they're really not doing a cost benefit analysis. That's my biggest pet peeve, really.
And the cost of accessible tools is so wild, right? Like the fact that your wheelchair is like thousands and thousands of dollars, my prosthetic leg is thousands and thousands of dollars. Again, it's like adding these extra layers onto accessibility, or not prioritizing it, or like being like, okay, if you want it, you're going to have to spend an exorbitant amount of money to be able to access these things, right? Which again is going to enforce socioeconomic, privileges. It's going to enforce a lot of times, like, yeah, so more white, richer, disabled folks are they able to get by, but like as we cross different barriers, like it just gets harder and harder.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask that. From my experience, I have to pay, my glasses are quite expensive, but a lot of glasses are covered still under Medicare, or at least under insurances, so I'm able to get some of that back. So in your situation, like say, Christy, with your prosthetics, and Carly with your chair or a van or something like that, forgive me for being ignorant, but I don't know if listeners know this, but do you get any assistance with that, or is that all out of pocket?
For me, I've been involved with the War Amps since I was a kid, and so they are like a big help here in Canada. They're a not-for-profit organization that helps, folks with limb differences and amputees. Specifically, like the CHAMP program is the Child Youth Amputee program. So for me, like they were, some is covered by the government, but like also CHAMPs really helps like I have a swimming leg that I'm able to go into the pool with, which basically just means it's waterproof. And I do have a running blade too. And so that's been super helpful. I just got a new prosthetic last year, and it's the first new leg I've had in 20 years. And the government was able to cover most of it, but then the foot didn't cover it, so I had to pay $500 out of pocket. But because I've been involved with the War Amps, like they were able to cover that cost, and I got that money back. So I'm been lucky enough that between the government and the War Amps, I've been able to be covered mostly.
I think it's so interesting that literally we have to say things like our foot wasn't covered. Yeah. When in reality, like the able-bodied person next door will be like, what do you mean you don't have access to something you put on the ground? Yeah. Like, and that's the same for me, right? Like my chair itself is, if you add up all the components, is like $25,000-$30,000. Can I go without it? Nope. And the government continues to be like, I'm just gonna keep charging you exorbitantly for these crazy things that you need, but you don't have a choice. It's not like I'm asking for like the Mercedes version of a chair. I'm just asking for a chair that works for 16 hours a day over 5 years, to be able to function so that I can live a life, right?
Absolutely.
So that's where I think the whole like selfish government comes into the fact, because they know they can raise the prices on these things, because they know there's such a small sector of folks with disabilities that need it, but really the population of us who need these things are growing. So that in itself I find incredibly ableist.
I mean, and it is interesting, right? Like they always talk about like you know, unless you die at an early age without experience any sickness, right? Like the disability community, like most people are going to be disabled at some point in their lives for many different reasons. So it's, you know, it's in everyone's best interest, you'd think, to like build an accessible world and to have, you know, services available to you should you ever need them.
Yep.
Yep.
And that's the biggest
Absolutely.
pet peeve that I have about the current Accessible Canada Act right now, is that literally it only covers federal buildings. So it's great. I can get into Service Canada or anywhere in Ottawa with a government, you know, space. But other than that, they didn't really take the true needs of what we needed as a community and actually hear us. They were just like, what can we do to put a band-aid solution on it? And that also is just like, if you're gonna spend all that effort and get all these consultations to bring in something as big as this act, then do it right.
Yeah.
Calling him out, Carly. Like,
I love
it. I love
Carly doesn't pull any punches.
Nope.
Yeah, I love it.
Nope.
You got no more craps to give, you know? It's great.
One thing I'm really good at is self-advocating, but again, it's exhausting. So
yeah.
But since we've talked so much about like the outward access needs and ableist things, I'd like to switch the conversation to internalized ableism, which is a huge topic. But perhaps, Christy, you can start us off on that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was something I wanted to chat about too, because, you know, I'm reflecting on a lot of like my journey as like a disabled human, you know, being young and, you know, being in and out of hospital so much. Like it was just a real big part of my life, you know, and I was a wheelchair user for quite a bit of time too as a young person, and, you know, going through schools. And then it was really when I finally got like fitted for the prosthetic, and then all of a sudden I could, you know, we talk about passing and that idea of like really liking that, you know, and not just because it's easier, but also because what does that open for me? So you know, and I'm being a quote, you know, an actor and a theater artist. Like the theater is wildly and film is wildly like ableist. Like as I learn about so many other, you know, artists in other forms, like in, you know, whether it's visual arts or dance, you know, even other performing arts that have just better access for disabled folks. Like, you know, in so many movies, like disabled characters are played by able-bodied people because the industry doesn't even believe that, you know, disabled actors are good enough to play disabled roles, which is, you know, which is wild. And so I think, you know, I felt like, because I wanted this part, you know, I wanted to make my life as this, I'm like, okay, well, I will be able to do it as long as I can pass as able-bodied, as long as I am physically fit and or don't complain or don't, you know, if I'm having a tough day, I can never show that. And, you know, I think I've spent like 20 years in the industry, like self-harming in many different ways, like, you know, not meeting my emotional and sometimes physical needs, because I truly believed that I didn't belong there if I, you know, couldn't be surpassing my disabled body, if I could prove that I could be there. So it's just even really been in the last few years, like as we dismantle so much like anti-oppression within the theater, and so much of like the white supremacy that, you know, conducts so much of what that means, like exceptionalism and perfectionism, and how truly like I am a better artist when I can own all of me, all the parts of me. And my one person show Woody too is like, there's a big section of it is about me, the idea of passing and being a young person and just wanting all the things that able-bodied folks had, and believing that I could have it if I could fool people to thinking I was able-bodied or could surpass my disability. But truly, like, it's been a discovery of like how it actually makes me who I am and actually makes me a better artist. So I think that, internalized ableism was a huge part of me, like reading the outside and not allowing myself to be human and punishing myself. So for me, that's how it manifested. And I'm still, as we dismantle all the things within it, that that leads me to be who I am as a human, and that's part of my art. So anyway,
yeah, I echo that, Christy. And also, as a theater artist, there's a lot of work that we have to do that is yet to be acknowledged in the space when we walk into a space. And I know that some of the onus is on me as a human, which I'm getting better at owning day by day or minute by minute. But just in general with every industry, but I do think the arts has a lot to do with it. But sometimes I just wish there was a little less homework when I walked into a room.
Yeah.
And a little bit more like, this is actually set up for me. They want me for who I am as a human and not, not because I fill a diversity checkbox or not because I have a really cute service dog, which is fine by me. If you want the dog, you can have the dog.
Very, very cute.
But I think too, for me, a lot of my internalized ableism has come from generation gaps, whether it be my parents or my grandparents or someone in my family that's just been like, has just tried to push down and be like, no, you can do anything and everything you've set your mind to, when really at the end of the day, sometimes I just want to acknowledge that, like, today or tomorrow or the next day might be a really crappy day, and that's okay. I don't have to solve the world's problems, but it just becomes a thing when it becomes hammered into your mindset, and you're not really given the option to digest it.
Yeah. And so often, like, you feel like you get these invitations. The people are like, no, we want you to come. We want you to come and join our space. But in the back of your mind, okay, like, you actually don't want me. Like, you don't want me to be like, I can't actually physically get on my foot right now because I'm having phantom pains. But so like if I could actually, meet someone where I'm at, sometimes like they will be like, oh my goodness, oh, I didn't realize you were like actually disabled. You know what I mean? Like, I think they hope that it's just all going to be fine. You can just show up and, oh, wait, I didn't think about that there's stairs here. Or, oh, I didn't think about ABC. And then you worry that it's going to get turned on you. And the people that invited you are going to go, oh, this was a terrible mistake. I'm never going to work with a disabled person again. Oh boy, I shouldn't have even done it. Yeah. So, then we make the accommodations and we make no, it's fine. It's great. It's good.
Yeah. I would love to be able to walk into a space and not have to wear a mask every time I come in and be like, it's fine, it's great, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to touch on, for me, it's funny because I didn't actually even know the term internal ableism until y'all said it, so I'm living for this. All of my therapy now has come to this, and I go, that's what it is. This makes so much sense to me now. But for me, especially when I was in elementary school, I remember as a kid, and I brought it up at the start, but I would get these textbooks that were large print, and they were large print as in they were size 24, 28 fonts. And there are individuals that need that. And if they do, that's awesome. I wasn't one of those people. So for years of my life, I was carrying around pretty much a glorified weapon at how heavy these books were with me everywhere I went, because I was kind of told that that's what I needed. I was told that I need this big textbook because and I'm a younger kid at this time. So I go, okay, well, that must be what I need, even though I can read the regular textbooks just fine. Like, a little bigger would have been nice, but like, I guess I need the big textbook because that's what all of the people around me are saying I need and what I've been given. And the same thing happened with like magnifiers. I get magnifiers all the time, and they're always like, oh, do you need a note taker? And I remember as a kid being like, I don't need this stuff. Like, I need to sit at the front of the class, and I need you to not use a green pen on the whiteboard. And that's it. Like, everything else I can navigate on my own. And it actually wasn't until I went to college, and I won't name the college. Carly will know specifically what I'm talking about. There was a counselor there, not the counselor I have now. She's lovely. If she's listening, you're the best. But a previous counselor. I remember I was a youngin, so maybe like 22, 21 maybe. And I go into this university and I sit down and I am there in the disability center and I'm going, okay, like I would like to get new technology, or I would like to, at least inform my teachers that I need to sit closer. Also, something that really helps me is to get the PowerPoints early so I can see them and put them on my computer and follow along on my computer versus on the big screen. And so all that stuff usually is what happened for me. And I go to this woman and she's like, okay, but you're going to need a recorder and you're going to need a note taker and you're going to need somebody there to assist you with reading the textbooks, and you're going to need, an e-textbook and all these things. And she's going on and on and on. And I go, no, like I don't need that e-textbook. Oh, no, I don't need the note taker. Oh, no, I don't need that. Well, no, of course you do. And I remember sitting there going, and I'm not a very confrontational person by nature. Maybe it's because I've had to repress so much stuff with just like, I don't know, disability or anxiety. I don't know, but I'm not normally a very assertive person. And I told this woman, I go, I don't think you're hearing me. I'm not asking for any of that stuff. You're telling me I need it. And at the time, I didn't really clock it as ableism, but reflecting back, I was like, oh man, like you're trying to project what you think I need onto me as a disabled person. And it blew my mind, especially because they were in a position working with disabled people. And I was just going, I was so confused at the time. And I remember in my head, I felt like I offended her and I felt so bad. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got home, I talked to my partner. I was like, am I this terrible monster for kind of sassing this lady? And he was like, no, absolutely not. She projected things onto you that you didn't need. And so it's interesting where that can kind of happen. And I think, just as both of you wonderful individuals brought up, is I internalized that for so many years. I thought that I had to have the big textbook, I had to have the magnifiers, I had to have it all, because that's what visual impairment meant. And I started to realize is that's what it means to able-bodied visual people, not necessarily me as a person. And there are folks that need magnifiers, that need all those things, and if they do, that's wonderful, but I didn't. So it was a very interesting moment to kind of click into that and go, oh, no. And also, I can advocate for myself and say, I'm good, thank you, though, So it's funny how it goes full circle, at least for me, like that. But
that's a great story.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I mean, that's the classic, right? Like, and yeah, disability is a deeply personal experience, right? That's that, like, and I'm sure this person was just trying to help, or like had in their, of course, always like good intentions, like I'm going to help and I know what you need, but it's like, no, actually you don't, because you're not that human being.
Yeah, and I think there are individuals, unfortunately, that are ableist, and I think they kind of just go with it and they're kind of cool with it. But I think for the most part, at least speaking from my experience, and I don't know if you both feel the same, but I think people, as you mentioned, Christy, don't intend to be like that. But same with, for example, like I have some other visual impairments in my family, and you learn how to help someone who is visually impaired or fully blind navigate. And a lot of folks will just go and grab a blind person and try to move them when really you want to touch their elbow, but you also want to approach them first and say, hi, I'm so and so. Can I please assist you? And then they decide if they want help or not. Or if they do want you to lead them somewhere, you don't just grab them by the hand and pull them along, right? And it's things that I think people, or maybe with you, Carly, when you go to a grocery store, I'm sure people are like, oh, I'll get that top shelf item. And you're like, I don't want that can of soup. I'm good. Like, I will ask you if I need it. But I think that's, if I were to pass on anything from at least my experience or my experience with other disabled folks, is that a lot of them will ask you if they need help. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that's the case of assuming is part of the problem with ableism.
I think so. And I mean, Carly, I know you have lots of experience of the people like touching your chair. People also come and touch at my prosthetic too, and it's like because they believe it's not like, well, it's not actually part of you. It's not like I'm touching your skin, but you're like, no, actually, it is part of me. So yeah, would you just come up and touch? Well, maybe some people come and touch random people, which don't do that. So
Not during COVID, please.
yes, yeah, no kidding. But yeah, it's a really it's an interesting thing.
I specifically remember when I was first training my first service dog, Oakley. One of my first questions when we started going out in public was, how much do I owe other people? Like, do I really have to sit there and tell them the whole story and disclose my disability and yada yada yada? And and my trainer was so lovely. She was just like, well, do you think you really have to explain why you use a chair? And I was like, well, no, but it depends on how nicely they ask. And she was like, nope, your chair is equipment, your service dog is equipment. So if you have the time, and if whoever it is a nice human, and you want to go into that conversation, you certainly can. But you don't owe them anything. And that's been one of my strongest things that I've carried forward to not only using my service dog in public, which I do for multiple hours a day, every day, and they literally come with me to wherever I go, including on and off stage. But the whole point is that I don't owe anyone anything. And I actually don't like when people ask if I need help, because that to me disproves the fact that I have a voice, and a voice that I've worked really hard on being like, yeah, today I'm going to be assertive, and today I'm going to ask for what I need. And I've needed to learn that desperately. I've needed to learn that all the way through my life, whether it's bringing out that lovely binder that explains my life in elementary school, or just walking into an audition now as a 30-year-old human. But it's just as simple as yes or no. It's not, I don't owe them anything.
Yeah, I think and I'm really proud of you for getting to that point. I know for me, there's still even times where I'm also nearing 30, and I still sometimes don't ask for help. And there are folks that clock it and assist me. But it is something that I am working on, because I do think that there's a huge importance to that. And I think it's important that you advocate for yourself. And I think it's also getting rid of, at least for me, the shame of it. I don't think there's anything wrong. Like when other people are disabled, I don't think there's anything wrong with disability as a whole. But I think for me, at least, there's some fear when you share that with people, because you do get the people that are super lovely and super great and know the line. And then you get people that go to restaurants and read every item on the menu to you. And you're like, no, thank you, awkward date that I'm on. I don't need that. Like I will let you know if I do. So I think for me, I've kind of found a double-edged sword with expressing when I need help, but then also not. So I think that's really cool that you have found that in your spirit, Carly, to just be like, hey, I'm going to advocate and I'm going to tell you what I need. And if I don't need you, I don't need you. Because I know, for example, when you and I first started hanging out, I had to ask you a couple of times what you needed or what I was doing. And because I would just assume I would go and I would, swipe the door for you, thinking that I was being helpful. And I remember I had to ask you, like, is that okay for me to just not beeline, but walk in front of you and swipe the door? And you're like, yeah, because you're opening the door for me. Like, it's not any different. You're just doing it in a different way. And I was like, okay, cool. But I wanted to vocalize that because I think that's something we have to note too, where I am a disabled person, but I don't know everybody's disability. Like, I don't know what works best for you, Christy. I don't know what works best for you, Carly. Like, so I think it's important that if you don't know, and I hear you, Carly, when you say that I will advocate for myself, I love that. But I also think it's okay if you don't know to ask. Be like, how can I help you? And if your response, Carly, is to say, I'll let you know, then that's a great answer.
Yeah.
But I think it's trying to find that middle line of advocating for yourself as a disabled person, but also helping your able-bodied counterparts to interact with you.
Yeah. And for me, it's the sense of like the really awkward people that decide to hang around you and be like, "Are you sure? You look like you really can't get that thing out of the freezer." But in reality, it's like, I've already told you no. I'm okay to do it. But, thanks for the effort. What made you not hear me that first time?
Yeah, true. At some point, it's like, are you just choosing not to
Yeah.
listen? It's like, disabled or not, I told you I have it, so please
Right?
stop asking. Yeah.
And then there are sometimes
Yes,
at the end of the day where, like, I just choose to conserve my energy. So if someone else can open the door for me, great. You win bonus points.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's all a part of like relationships and human relationships, and as you get to be friends with someone and the intimacy grows, like for me, I always find like that's such a part of a friendship too, where someone actually like gets the courage to ask if they don't know. They're like, so can you tell me your story? Can you share your path to where you are today as like a prosthetic user? Like I know that takes a lot of courage from people to ask that. And you can feel like it's that getting to know you sort of thing of friendship and intimacy that's a part of it. Something I think when I was trying to pass or just trying to like avoid that conversation because I was living in that little fantasy of like I'm just an able-bodied person like with my little secret, but always like the relationships and the life just gets better when you're able to talk to people about it, and I don't want people to have to always guess about what I need. So I'm happy to talk about my access points and what I need from people. And I welcome questions now and that too. So it's, that's a part of my journey, I think.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I literally have had that just recently because to be honest, I haven't showed or told a lot of people about my disability. So this podcast, when we got it, I was thrilled, but there was a part of me that was like, oh, shiitake, I now need to tell a bunch of people because a lot of people don't know. So it's really interesting to kind of to find that balance. But
So moving forward from this conversation, is there anything that kind of sticks out as a have to moment in the sense of like, what can other ables do to actually be an active ally versus a passive ally and work hard to kind of dismantle the wonderful world of ableism as it is?
Mm-hmm. I think a call to action would be absolutely like starting to look at the world through the lens of access, I guess, is one. Like, start to notice like, okay, like this place, that this restaurant, is there a curb up? Is this actually accessible? Like, is this bathroom, is there actually a wide enough door? So to just kind of figure out, the physical accessibility of the world, to open your eyes to that would be a call to action. I would love able-bodied folks to think about like the physical access of space, and then moving on to, of course, like as we move on to like emotional safety and all the other great things. But just to examine to examine the spaces we take up in the world and how they could be more accessible, I think.
Carly, what's yours?
Mine, I think, would be aside from Christy's point, because it's great and it's kind of the stepping point to it all, but I think mine would be realizing that everyone in this world has an access need, whether it's how long you can sit in front of a Zoom class without some fatigue, or how long you can go on a phone meeting, or bathroom breaks, or things like that. Like, everyone has some form of access need. So if other folks tried to clock that for themselves, I think they'd be a lot more aware that access needs come in literally all shapes and sizes. So I think that is a good way to start kind of branching into that emotional side of things, or the idea of taking up space.
Yeah, for sure.
Laurel, what's your thought?
And I think mine just is more overarching, I suppose, where it's just the general idea of assumption, which I think is not necessarily even disabled focused. I think that we look at somebody and oftentimes we're like, oh, this person's like this, so therefore they must be like this because of maybe they're in a wheelchair or the color of their skin or, you know, how they carry themselves. And the truth is that you really don't know somebody until you actually get to know them. So I think that in a disability mindset, it's having those open conversations if the person is willing to discuss what they need. And I think that also can lead to what both of you touched on, you know, that leads to more accessibility, that leads to more people going, oh yeah, let me put an elevator in this space. Because I think that the challenge is, especially with ableism, is people just don't know or they're not exposed to it. So I think it's important that if I'm not saying if you're an able-bodied person, please don't just go up to somebody in a wheelchair and go, so what is your life like? Like, I think there has to be a line there. But I also think that there is this kind of assumption about disabled people that isn't necessarily always accurate. So I encourage people to maybe open their mindsets to get to know somebody with a disability, or even like date somebody with a disability, or like hire somebody with a disability, because I think there's assumptions that are inaccurate. And I hope that people broaden their minds and learn more about it.
And going back to my point about, you know, acknowledging something as equipment and giving people the time in the day, like if you want to have a genuine conversation and you are genuinely curious and you will take your learning forwards and do something with it, I am 100% up for having that conversation. It's that when people start the conversation with a bunch of assumptions and then just carry the conversation like they know everything and that I truly have no voice, then I'm gonna shut you down and tell you that this isn't a conversation worth having. But by all means, if you are genuinely going to take the information and do something better with it, I will give you my soul in a conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of conversation, we've definitely had a good one. Uh, thank you so much, Christy. So we like to end our show with a question. So this question is, what is your biggest disabled as folk moment? So this can be either your most triumphant moment or epic fail of living life with a disability.
Oh, you know, I was going to tell you folks another one, but I actually just changed my mind about what I'm going to talk about now, because as we've talked about, I'm thinking about like relationships specifically with other humans. You know, I know I do feel more comfortable with other folks who are disabled or experience disability in my life because I don't have to explain a lot of things. So growing up, so sometimes I'm scared, you know, of able-bodied folks, for lack of a better term, or intimidated or whatnot. And like, certainly in my dating life as a young person, it was always kind of awkward. And you know, that moment of the intimacies of getting to, you know, slowly reveal parts of myself. And I just thought of like the moment with my current, hopefully hopefully for a while, husband, my partner of like 21 years. He just actually told me a story a while ago that I hadn't realized. But you know, we had been, you know, intimate for a while and getting to know each other. And he reminded me that the first time that we actually said that we loved each other was when I actually like took my prosthetic off in front of him and showed him what my leg looks like with my limb difference, and let him look at it and ask all these questions. And that was the day that we said that we loved each other. And I realized, oh yeah, absolutely. Like, because what a moment of intimacy and of truly revealing yourself to someone. And he's an able-bodied person. And, you know, that was like a really, really important moment for me. Of course, like my mother is able-bodied, my father, my family, like I trust them. But to be true, that was the first time I ever really truly got to really started putting my trust in another able-bodied person to hold my experience and my life as a disabled person, and to see me as, you know, a human being with the potential for all the things that humanity is, right? For the beauty, for the ugly, for the, for the ugly parts as well as the beautiful parts. And so I think I wanted to share that today too, to be like, yeah, that's, loving my disabled self through other folks' eyes, but ultimately through mine, and that intimacy is possible, and we can like reach across the aisle to able-bodied folks, and we can all, all the intersections of humanity, it is possible to find that human love between us all. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today.
That was so nice. That was great. Thank you, Kristi.
Thank you, Kristi.
You're welcome.
Kristi, do you have any upcoming projects, or where can folks find you and learn more about how awesome you are?
I am actually on my way to Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island for the summer, where I'm going to be performing. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited! In a new musical called Dear Rita, which is a celebration of the life and times of Rita McNeil, who's a very famous Nova Scotian. So excited to do a show that's going to be a smaller show in a very large theater, because they are doing pretty well out east, so they are able to have a bit of a festival this summer. So if you're out east, for any of our folks out east in Prince Edward Island this summer, I will be hanging out there. So
awesome. Well,
yes.
If I can get over there, I'll be front row, ready to go. Carly, road trip? Are we on our way?
Yes, I've already told Kristi I want to be in her suitcase. So if you can fit me and a dog, possibly too, I will be there in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. Oh yes, yeah. Please come. Stay.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Kristi. We really appreciate your time. And until next time, my friend Carly, this has been episode 3. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Disabled as Folk is possible thanks to support from TELUS STORYHIVE, the National Screen Institute, and Dave Shumka. This podcast was developed by us, Carly Neese and Laurel Carter.
Our producer is Mac Brock, with sound editing and music by Mustafa Rafiq, with music support from Ethan Bookma. For updates and exclusive content, you can find us on Instagram @DisabledAsFolk. Thanks for listening.